Good morning, Bookmap traders. Welcome to the live stream. Looks like we got 38 people hanging out. Smash that thumbs up button if you can. Say good morning in the chat. My name is Charles. I run a community called Piratetraders, where we hang out. We're day traders. Focus mostly on the ES, the NQ, and the two-way auction process between them. My focus is on market profile, Bookmap, and market internals. Three different platforms that I use to give me an idea of what's going on in the market. The chart over here on the left is the market profile chart. That is TPO charts that show how much time the market spends in certain areas, and volume profile charts that show how much volume traded in those areas. Over here on the right, it is Bookmap that shows me the liquidity in the order books and then how the liquidity plays out throughout the day. And then in the back here behind the two, you'll find what I call the market internals, which is basically the breadth, the advancers versus decliners, and the ticks. And those just give me some sort of under the belly perspective of the market, what's going on with the underlying assets. Generally on a Monday morning, I think the best way to start the week is to zoom out to get some perspective on what's been happening in the market and context moving forward. So the last few weeks have been a little bit tricky here. The market has been trying to decide what it wants to do. We created a small balance area. The market broke out of that balance, came back up, created another small balance area, broke out of that, re-entered the previous one, and rotated up to the opposite end. So we can look at this whole thing as one large balance area over the last few weeks. And the tricky thing about opening right smack dab in the middle of a balance area is that it can be very, very hard to know which way the market is going to break. Are we heading back up towards that balance area high, or are we turning around to head back down towards that balance area low? Which way does the market really want to go here? So to look for some insights, let's start by zooming out all the way on the monthly chart and work our way back. So the first thing that we see when we look at the monthly chart is that the market has pulled back to the 20 simple moving average on the monthly, and it is now holding as support. Nothing super special in that information, but it is an area where if the market wanted to bounce on a month time frame and turn around and head higher, it could do that here. We are also back testing previous support, and right now that support is holding. So now let's zoom in and take a look at the weekly. So on the weekly, we see that the market is finding support both on a trend line from the lows, although it's sitting right on it right now at the open. Finding support from a trend line in the low. It has also re-entered an old balance area from March to May. And so that re-entry was the pull down to the opposite end at the lower part. And then we triggered a turn right around to the top. So support from here, balance from here. And then lastly, let's zoom in and take a look at the daily and see if there's anything that jumps out at us here. Yeah, I would just say it looks like a larger balance area. Same as on the market profile chart. This just looks like balance to me. And so the way we'll treat it is as if it's just a larger balance area. So if we were going to do that, if that was going to be our context this morning, to create a narrative, to guide us forward as to what could take place today in the market, and we were thinking that this was just a larger balance area, how would we be playing that? What would we be looking for? Well, first off, we'd be assuming chop inside the overnight range. Okay? Normally, I would combine the little tiny bit of trading that happened on Friday after 4 p.m. and include that with the overnight. But because of this massive gap down that we had, I'll just ignore this. We'll pretend this isn't even here. We'll just completely ignore it. And we'll just treat this range here as the overnight range for the ES, which means the high is up around 43.22 and the low is around 4,300. Okay, so in between that area, I will assume chop. I will assume if we push down, they'll find support and come back up. If we push up, they'll find resistance and come back down. They'll just continue to grind around inside this overnight range until they're ready to break out. What would a breakout of the range look like? They would either push above the high and then find new buyers up there and keep going, or they would push below the low and find new sellers there and keep going. So to me, if I know two things, if I know the fact that we are in a balance area, right? We're right smack dab in the middle of a balance area. One of two things is going to happen today. Either the market is going to start to head back up to the upper end of balance because it wants to try to break out and keep going higher, or it's heading back down to the lower end again because we looked below, failed, pushed up, we looked up, pulled back down. So now we're heading back down to the opposite end. It's got to be one of those two things that comes next. Now, I'm not saying we have to do one of those two things today, but from this moment, one of those two things is happening over the next, let's say, the next 3 to 4 days. One of those two things is happening. We're not going nowhere for 4 days. I'll put it to you that way. We are either going to head up to the balance area high and try to break out up there, or we're going to head back down to the balance area low. So this morning, what happens with this overnight range between 4,300 and 4,324 will give us our first insight as to which of those two is happening. If it pushes above the overnight high and it finds support, we'll look for continuation up to the opposite end of balance. If it pushes below and finds resistance, we'll look for it to head to the lower end of balance. Okay? But if it looks above and fails, or look below and fails, so it tries to get above and comes back in, tries to get below and comes back in, then we might be looking at a day where the market just goes sideways all day. Because, hey, we're in the middle of a balance area. A perfect location to balance and to go nowhere and to just go sideways. So that overnight high and overnight low, as I'm calling them here, 43.24 and 4,300, that area is the sort of deal or no deal level for the market to decide, is it ready to go higher or not, lower or not. And so all we can do is wait and watch. We'll be keeping a close eye on the liquidity in Bookmap to see, is there big pockets of liquidity popping up towards the upper or lower end of that range? Are we starting to see liquidity up at 58? Are we starting to see liquidity down at 42.40? We'll also be looking for the liquidity right around price. Is it even? Is it the same amount of liquidity above and below price? Or is there a huge imbalance where there's way more liquidity on one side or another? For example, right now, there's 1,300 contracts above and 1,300 below. No big deal. But does there become a huge imbalance? We got to wait and see when that opening bell rings in 15 minutes. If you have not yet, please smash that like button. Give me that thumbs up. And say hello in the chat. Good morning, Gino. Nap is here. Global Investments. Welcome, Global. Trading for a living. Good morning to you. JK in the house. Alois. Good morning to you. PSC, welcome. Sahil, good to see you. He says the Israel war news might affect lower opening. Here's the good news that I can give you as far as that is concerned. Whatever effect the news about the war is going to have on the market will tell us by first pushing above the overnight high and finding support, or pushing below the overnight low and finding resistance. I mean, that it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter how the market reacts to the news. It doesn't matter if the market is going up or if the market is going down today. We will know because of what happens at the overnight high and the overnight low. That's what will tell us. So I don't know how the market will react to the news, but I will know once I see what's happening. Good morning, Tom, Alan, David G, Mint Rock, Busta, and Nicholas. Any other questions for the chat? I got 15 minutes to fill. Come on, hit me with your questions. Truman says, what will more inventory above price than below tell you? That the market is likely to go higher than lower. So the market is always moving towards the direction of liquidity. Now, it can be tricky because this is happening on different time frames, right? So there are times in Bookmap where you may zoom way out and you may notice that there's like a giant thing of orders just like sitting up here, some random spot. And you'll say to yourself, well, there you go. We got to be heading up towards that. That's the biggest pool of liquidity. And it's waiting up there. The market must be going up to 43.75. And then all day long, the market will trade down here. It'll do its thing and nothing will happen. And that'll just be sitting there. And it'll be there all day and it'll be there the next day when the market opens and nothing will have happened with it. So sometimes there is liquidity in the order books, which is playing a longer time frame. It's a swing trader who's got their orders sitting in there, and they'll be sitting there for as long as it takes until the market gets to that level or not. But it does imply that as long as that liquidity is still up there, the market is probably not going to make some giant move to the downside. It is probably just going to keep going sideways until it either can pop up and tag that liquidity, or it goes sideways long enough that this disappears, that trader decides to remove those, move those levels often down to a lower level. And then you see liquidity build up somewhere down here. So that is an insight that you have based on where the most liquidity is sitting in the order book. You know that's a magnet, and that price eventually is going to try to go up there and tag it. It doesn't always happen right this minute, but wherever the most liquidity is, that is where the market will go. It'll go there in the most confusing path, though. Cortman says NQ. Yeah, let's take a look at the NQ. NQ it up. Look at that, folks. Look at that. Look at that. That's a market imbalance. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So they created a balance area. Last week, you rotated from the lower end of balance right back up to the upper end of balance. Backfilled a gap that needed to be backfilled. Okay, so you basically got rid of that magnet that was pulling on price to fill the gap. And now you've turned right back around and you're heading down again. So we can keep it simple with the NQ, folks. Exactly the same as the ES, whichever way it breaks this lower overnight range. So we'll call the NQ's overnight high 15,044 and the NQ's overnight low 14,970. That's the range. Whichever way it breaks out of there, look for continuation higher. And it's sitting right on that balance area high. So this is either today it'll break out of balance and it'll get continuation, which probably means we're heading up towards 15,356, or it looks above and fails and then it's heading down. So that overnight high on the NQ will be very, very important. Can they hold it? That's what we need to know. So yeah, exactly the same as the ES. Watch that overnight high, watch that overnight low. Pushing above, finding support would be bullish for continuation. Pushing below, finding resistance would be very bearish, that we're heading to the opposite end of balance. And anything in the middle would be a diddle, because we're likely to just keep rotating. Remember, the market loves to grind around on a balance area high. Sahil says, I'm a newbie to your course. Ideally, what time is the best to start trading? Like, give an hour for the market open? Yeah, so this is a great question, and it is something that every trader needs to figure out about themselves. So throughout the trading day, between 9:30 a.m. and 4 p.m., there are 3 different markets that the market experiences. 3 different sort of just personalities that it takes on throughout the day. So you got the initial balance. That's the first hour. It is exactly what it's called, balance, right? That first hour of the day is where the market needs to figure out which way it wants to go. It needs to play tug of war, and one side needs to tell the other side, hey, fuck you, we're going higher. Or hey, fuck you, we're going lower. But first, they need to have that balance. They need to have that tug of war where they compete with each other. So that's the first hour of the day. We call that the initial balance. That is often very, very difficult to have a clue of what is going to come next, right? We can have an idea of the behavior the market is going to have. If it's a gap, we know it's likely to try to fill the gap. If it's like today, opening inside the previous day's range, we know it's likely to be chop. The market, we know what will be support and resistance. We know the areas where the market is likely to reverse and head back down. But in that initial balance, it is very, very difficult to know when to enter a trade and where to put a stop, because it's just kind of bouncing all over the place and it can reverse anywhere and anything can happen. And it's very frustrating. So yes, most of the time, most days, it would be in your best interest to just watch the market for the first hour. Let it balance. Let it play tug of war, and you wait to see who wins that game. Because seeing who wins the game at the end of the first hour will give you insights for the rest of the day, right? You could take 10, 20 trades today if you want, based on the information you got from that first hour, if you're patient enough to wait for that information of who wins that tug of war. So I don't have any hard rule that says I cannot take a trade in the first hour. Look, if I'm looking at the chart and I see an opportunity, I go, listen, we're pushing into resistance. The market is likely to pull back down to this level down here. I could go short. It's just, I want to be very cautious. I want to be absolutely certain that I'm right, because it's in this balancing mode where anything could happen. On top of that, just personally for me, something I've learned about my behavior as a trader is that when I take on a loss, it affects my psychology moving forward. I start to get more frustrated. I start to get more emotional. My trading, I start to make more mistakes, do more stupid things I know I shouldn't do. In particular, if that's first thing in the morning, with the very first trade I take, if it's a losing trade, I will just start doing stupid shit the rest of the day. So that adds a layer of caution to the idea of jumping into trades first thing in the morning during that initial bounce. Now, that being said, there are people that just trade the initial bounce. That's it. Every morning they get up, they trade for an hour, and they're done for the day. So if that sort of unknown, choppy, tug of war type of environment fits your personality and you like to trade that, well, then go for it. It's to each their own. Good morning to Mike Who Thinks. We got 98 people hanging out, 47 likes. If you're feeling the love this Monday morning, please smash that thumbs up. I sure would appreciate it. We got 4 minutes to market open. Good morning to Caesar. And Bust a Move says, what's the difference between Window Trader and Window Trader Lite? So Window Trader Blue or Window Trader Lite. There are some subtle differences. I would just say you can use Window Trader Lite. That's totally fine. It has all the gizmos and gadgets that one needs. But the added conveniences of the Window Trader Blue include the composite volume. So the orange volume that you see over on the left, it's kind of blocked right now, but that's where I can combine however much time from the past I want. Right now I have like 400 days all kind of smushed together there. That also depends on the quality of your data feed. And then you've got intraday objects. So once the market starts to trade, you know how I have a split profile. I have one profile where it's all collapsed together and one where each 30-minute TPO is split out. The way that is set up is actually called an intraday object, where each 30-minute TPO is kind of set up as its own thing. That is only available with the blue version, and then the market replay. So you can go in with the blue version and you can put in any time or date, and you can just click to start playing, and you can watch the market trade at any speed you want. You can choose what speed you want it to play through. And that is an incredibly potent tool for learning. If at the end of every day, you go back and replay that day over, like, say, a 5-minute period, you play it out at a speed where it takes about 5 minutes to scroll through the whole day, and you just sit and watch the profile move throughout the day, man, it really helps your brain to understand the levels and how the market reacts at them, and then where it goes and how it comes back up and it goes back down. That replay function is also only available with blue, but everything else you can do with the light. All right, 1 minute to market open. For those of you just joining us, we are opening for the ES right in the middle of a balance area, for the NQ right at a balance area high. So for both markets, we are using the overnight high, overnight low as levels to watch for an idea of what comes next. So support above 43.26 would be bullish. Anything else would be chop. And resistance below 4,300 would be bearish. Anything else would be chop. So for now, the market is in a chop zone. We're looking for more information. Let's zoom out here a little bit and see what's happening with the liquidity. Okay, it's about even. A little bit more above than below, but that also indicates chop this morning. For the NQ, we are calling the overnight high 15,044 and the overnight low 14,974. And so that's your range. It's a chop zone inside, and it changes with the break of that range. And for the ES, the overnight high is 43.24, and the overnight low is 4,300. We got a weak high as the chop begins. Shawshank says, I have completed 70% of your market profile e-course, and I love it. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. All right, so we're testing that overnight high. So this is the important level. From here, either the market can bring in the buyers to keep this momentum going, or it will become a look above and fail, and we'll be looking for more chop inside the overnight range. So literally right now, can they hold it? Can the buyers bring in support? All right, that's a look above and fail. No buyers at the overnight high. So that increases the odds of more chop. So if they push back up here again, back above 25, we'll play the game again. We'll say, can they come back down and turn it into support? But for now, it looks like we need to push back down into the overnight range. Looking for support in there. First potential support is 43.18 and then 43.12. Rui says, what about trading a more calm trending market like momentum between 4 and 5 a.m.? Yeah, I just don't get up that early in the morning, you know? So if I lived in a different place in the world where what I call the overnight market, you know, the European or the Asian markets, you know, if I was awake during those hours, I'd trade those hours. But because I'm here in America, I live in New York City, I trade the New York hours. As far as certain times of day presenting like easier than others, I disagree with that. I think there are times when it seems like the overnight is easier to trade. And then there are times when it seems like the regular trading hours are. I just think you got to pick one. Pick one and become an expert at it. Nico says add-ons on Bookmap. Yeah, I did add 2 things to my Bookmap setup. One is this thing right here, which just shows us the liquidity above and below the market. So the number here is the amount of, you know, buy orders below, the number of sell orders above, and then this is the delta between the two. And then also these little black boxes, those just show the number of liquidity. If there's more than 100 contracts at a level, it shows us more than 100. And anytime it pops up, that's like new liquidity. So if, for example, where it says 213, if all of a sudden that box were to be over here and it were to say 244, it would mean somebody just added more contracts. All right, so this still looks choppy to me. This does not feel like good support. So I think we need to test 43.30. We've got this little pocket of liquidity up here. I think the market needs to test that, just kind of poke up there and see if it'll fill. Once it does, then we'll know whether the support after that is trustworthy for continuation. Tape Reader 5 says, how did you come up with those numbers for support? Liquidity zones, volume, question mark. Yeah, it is volume and time from the overnight. So essentially the idea is simply this. When the regular trading hours came up here to the overnight high, we are making the decision. It's what's happening right now. We are making the decision. Do we want to take the market higher or not? Right? It's a yes or a no, a binary. If we can find the support up here, then we're trying to take the market higher. If not, we're going back to doing what they did in the overnight, which was in the overnight, they just chopped. They just went back and forth on this range over and over and over again, right? So if that's what I'm thinking, if that's the conceptual idea that I'm playing in my mind, that either we hold the support at the overnight high or we do more of what they did in the overnight, what levels should I think about as important levels? Well, the levels that were important in the overnight, obviously, right? So this first one is where we spent a lot of time in here. You could see these two right here. This one is where we spent a lot of time and brought in a lot of volume. And this one is the base of the single prints up from Friday, which often acts as support as well. So first support level, base of single prints. Second one, overnight volume and time. Third one, overnight time. And of course, those arrows are just to see what happens when we get there. Seven seven. Hi. Hi. Hi there. It's Monday. Okay, so we did technically just turn the overnight high into support, but again, I want to see the reaction after 43.30 before I really trust it. All right, well, I'm officially bullish now with this new buying above the overnight high. I do still think they need to pull back down. I wouldn't suggest FOMOing into a long at the high. I do think we still need to pull back down and test this area around 25 once again for support. However, I do think there will be buyers waiting once we do. Bullish. Bow, bow, bow. Sahil, just refresh. You should be able to refresh and get pretty close to real time. Tape Reader says, I love how you simply explain your analysis of what's going on live in the market. That's what I try to do. I try to just do stream of consciousness. Just whatever thought pops in my head of how I'm reading the market, I explain it to you guys. What am I looking for? When does it happen? What comes next? Speaking of which, testing. Overnight high for support. Here we go. Good morning, Nor Auto Trading. Let's take a look at the queue. Ooh, same exact thing as the ES. Oh, no. Ooh, not the same thing as the ES. Okay. NQ, very interesting this morning. So they poked below their overnight low, didn't get resistance. So then they were looking for more chop. They got it. They chopped all the way back above the overnight high. Now they're looking for support. So if when they pull back down, they can turn, I would call it 15,035. If they can turn this area right here into support, that would be extremely bullish because they already tried to take the market lower and they failed, right? Like the sellers tried to take control. They couldn't do it. So that really increases the odds the buyers will be able to. So you're looking for that support at the overnight high. Got some bot shenanigans up here. We really need them to let it break lower and test that overnight high. That's where the buyers are waiting. But for now, the shenanigans continue. $131 people hanging out. Bow, 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 bow. Welcome to the Bookmap page. My name is Charles, and we're watching the ES. I know you're thinking, you're like, Charles, isn't this support though? Isn't this the moment the buyers are stepping in? I don't trust them. I don't trust them. Why? Because of the Bookmap. Because of these icebergs. This feels like support stepping in. It feels like buyers building up momentum for that next leg up. But I got to see us break out of this little bot zone. All right, waiting to print the B period here and then see if they can hold 43.31 as support. If so, that will be bullish for continuation higher. So far, I would describe most of the buying today as short covering and not new buying because they haven't had a decent pullback, except for the very beginning of the day. All right. So I have to leave you here and switch on over to the private stream for Brigade members only. If you've been enjoying the stream thus far, if you've been appreciating what you've been seeing, and you want to hang out with us every day for the first hour, you should join the Brigade. It's only $10 a month. But what I will leave you with is this. I'm going to give you kind of two contradictory ideas at the same time. So the first is a bigger picture idea of like what's happening, let's call it on a day time frame. To me, the market this morning pushing above the overnight high and continuing to bring in new buyers, even though they are FOMO buyers that are chasing, right? The fact that it continues to bring in more buyers again and again is bullish to see, okay? The fact that we now have the value area above the overnight range is bullish to see. So as long as they can hold this overnight high around 43.25, as long as they can hold that, I will remain bullish the rest of the day. And my thought is that we're heading back up to test Friday's highs and monitor for continuation higher from there. However, right, there's a caveat in that. And the caveat is all the buying today that has happened above the overnight high has been FOMO buying. It's shorts that have been getting squeezed. Okay, shorts getting squeezed in here, shorts getting squeezed in here. And they haven't had any good buyers. We haven't had a good pullback to give those strong hand support buyers a chance to get in. So we have not actually confirmed the support yet. So if the market does pull back down through the opening price now, pull back down through 43.22, I would be bearish to go sideways inside the overnight range once again. Okay? So what I mean by that is bigger picture, the bulls have taken control, but they haven't quite convinced us yet. So they could lose control very quickly if they cannot hold that overnight high. But if the overnight high holds, then that is very, very bullish for continuation to the upside. Okay, so we're now testing this potential support around 43.30. Can they hold that? If not, well, there you go, they can't. So if not, the next support is what we just tested, 43.28. The one below that, 43.25. This, well, there you go. Before I even switch streams, this is the moment of truth here. Can they really hold it? Can they really bring in new buyers? They got the FOMO. They got the short covering. Can they bring in the strong hands? Here we go. Can they hold it? Man, holding it up by the skin of their teeth. All right, they're holding it for now. So that's it, folks. That's support right there. 43.23 must hold for the rest of the day for the market to remain bullish. But for now, it's holding. So if that breaks and the market passes back through the opening price, you know you're going to just start going sideways inside that overnight range. And then you know if they break that overnight low, they're looking to take the market lower. Okay? And probably the targets to the downside would be 42.89 and 42.77. But as long as they hold what is now that B period low we just made, they can keep it going up. Man, what a moment to have to switch streams. Sorry, guys. Sayonara. I will see you next week. If you are not a member of the brigade, head on over and check out Bruce's stream, also on the Bookmap YouTube page. If you are a member of the brigade, I'll see you there. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.